These are my favorite lines to look at. My favorite player props are one guy versus the next, and actually looking at some realistic expectations this next season that could maybe even help us out with our drafts. Let's go ahead and let's look at my top 7 player props right now on Underdog that are exclusively rivals. First one being Kadarius Toney versus T. Higgins. Now, if you would have told me, Mason, Toney versus Higgins, what you thinking here? Receiving touchdowns. I would say, okay, well, if I'm projecting out Kadarius Toney and his receiving touchdowns this next season, I mean, this is a wide receiver that, yes, has been hyper efficient from a per snap perspective, but he's used as a gadget type option, right? I mean, Kadarius Toney isn't necessarily a player that's out there on every down. I'd say, okay, well, probably expecting about 4 touchdowns this next year. I mean, through 2 seasons so far, the man's had 2 total touchdowns. So yeah, maybe 4's a reasonable projection. Whereas with T. Higgins, this is a wide receiver that is actually very talented on the field every play and is playing alongside Joe Burrow, of course, and most importantly, sees real volume. T. Higgins, a wide receiver that has had 19 touchdowns over the past 3 seasons. I'd say, okay, well, maybe, T. Higgins is going to be at 8, 9 touchdowns this next year. They have them pretty much even. It is T. Higgins versus Kadarius Toney plus half a touchdown. What is up with the expectations for Kadarius Toney this next season? This is honestly making me a little nervous, right? Because right now, Kadarius Toney goes in like round 6, round 7 of these underdog drafts. I've called him the worst pick in fantasy football. I have not drafted him at all there, and I've been targeting other players in that same range, and I'm fine taking T. Higgins with where he goes as a low-end wide receiver 1. So it's kind of concerning to see that the projections have them this close in the first place. I think this is just a bad prop. Very rarely will you ever hear me say that I think sports books or Underdog Fantasy puts out a bad line, because in general, I think that they know significantly more than I do. I think they know significantly more than you do. I think they know significantly more than everybody does, because hell, if they don't, I mean, people can go and take them up with these lines and they could be at risk of losing a lot of money. So generally, I am never willing to say, yeah, I know more, but come on. I mean, I don't see how this is not a bad line. Now, of course, if you want to check out any of these props on Underdog Fantasy, if you want to get in a draft with us, it's the same place. Y'all know we're drafting literally every single day on Underdog. It's the best ball tournaments, those ones that are no time commitment at all during this season, where I drafted 700 teams last year and won $150,000. I'm going to be drafting every single day there this year as well. And that's also where you can check out all these player props. You can also get into Underdog pretty much in every state. I mean, I'll throw the map up here, right here for everybody to see. Now let's go over to our next line. Another pair of receivers, this time Elijah Moore versus Sky Moore, right? And what I think is honestly a little useful to look at is going to be fantasy football ADP. Because if you look at fantasy football ADP, that's kind of like the wisdom of the crowds, right? I mean, if you're like into the stock market, for instance, I mean, obviously people say that markets are efficient and generally things will not be too mispriced. Now, every once in a while, yes, everybody will be off Josh Jacobs for whatever reason, and Josh Jacobs will be going in round 7, and you can find an incredible value with a mispriced market. But in general, I mean, people know what they're doing, right? I mean, if there are hundreds of thousands of underdog drafts being drafted every single week, then this ADP should probably be pretty damn good. And if you're looking at it, Elijah Moore is going at pick 85, whereas Sky Moore, on the other hand, is going at pick 114. So there is a 30 pick gap between these two players, with people expecting Elijah Moore to be the significantly better option. However, if you are looking at these receiving yards marks, right now, Elijah Moore is priced to have fewer receiving yards than Sky Moore. If you take the Elijah Moore side of this, you are getting 35 additional receiving yards on top. So if this next season, Sky Moore has 800 receiving yards and Elijah Moore has 780, but you're getting the plus 35 receiving yards on Elijah Moore, you still win with taking the Elijah Moore side there. So I honestly really like the Elijah Moore side as well. Now, speaking of markets generally being efficient, right? If we're looking at this fantasy football ADP, going over to some more wide receivers. Right now, Jamar Chase goes as pick 2 in pretty much every single fantasy football draft that you're going to be in, whereas Davante Adams is going in the second round. So Davante Adams, I mean, at this point, about to be the wide receiver 10 in ADP compared to Jamar Chase at 2. you would assume, yeah, I guess people are expecting Chase to have a much better season. What is it? Davante Adams plus 100 yards versus Jamar Chase? No, it's the exact opposite. Davante Adams is projected to have more receiving yards. You're able to take the Jamar Chase side and get an extra 25 receiving yards just for some safety. Now, of course, Davante Adams has just straight up crushed it, right? I mean, if you're looking over the past 3 seasons, Davante Adams is a wide receiver that's out there, and he is averaging about 95 receiving yards per game over the past 3 years. Whereas Jamar Chase, we haven't seen that level of dominance, but Davante Adams now going into his age 31 season, Jamar Chase stepping into his prime, Davante Adams' uncertain quarterback situation with the Las Vegas Raiders, Jamar Chase locked and loaded with one of the best starting quarterbacks in the NFL. What you could even do here, right, if you really wanted to. Now, I'm not even going to bother doing this. Y'all know I'm drafting like over 700 teams this year, so I already have like a balanced portfolio of my exposures. But if you really wanted to, I mean, hell, you could even go through and say, like, take Davante Adams in a lot of fantasy football drafts in like the late first round and have Davante Adams in a lot of spots. And then bet on Chase over Adams to kind of hedge your bets if you want. I'm not saying you have to do that, but generally, like if I'm seeing Davante Adams as like the wide receiver 9, I'll draft a lot of Davante Adams there. But if we're looking at these player props and I'm able to take Jamar Chase and get extra receiving yards on top of him, I'm going Chase. Now, going over to our next few lines, you're going to be running backs here. We're going to be looking at J.K. Dobbins versus James Conner. Now, if we're looking at both these running backs coming into next season, right? Dobbins is going significantly ahead of Conner right now in drafts. I mean, J.K. Dobbins in these underdog drafts is running back 18, whereas James Conner is the running back 28. So you're looking at a mid running back 2 versus a mid running back 3. And why are these guys being separated by so much? Is it the receiving down usage? Not really, right? I mean, J.K. Dobbins doesn't really catch the ball out of the backfield. Instead, I mean, hell, I would say James Conner should actually probably have more receiving yards, more receiving touchdowns. I mean, hell, more receptions in general, just based off what we've seen over the past few seasons and the fact that Lamar Jackson just simply does not check the ball down. But with that being said, why you would draft J.K. Dobbins is he's in a much better offense. The issue with James Conner, even if he's a 3-down player, is right now, the Arizona Cardinals have the lowest win total of any team in the NFL. So if they have the lowest win total of any team in the NFL, they are going to have very few trips to the red zone. They are going to have very few sustained drives, and they are going to have very few touchdown opportunities for James Conner. Whereas on the opposite end of the spectrum, the reason Dobbins is going well ahead of Conner in fantasy drafts is J.K. Dobbins is going to be on a good team. J.K. Dobbins is going to be in a good offense that has sustained drives, that has trips to the red zone, that will actually give J.K. Dobbins touchdown upside. So, I mean, I don't want to sit here and say James Conner's a bad fantasy football pick if you're getting him as a running back 3. I'm just explaining why he would be going so late and why J.K. Dobbins would be going so much earlier and how we can use that information to say it's probably a good bet to go ahead and assume that J.K. Dobbins probably has more rushing touchdowns than James Conner, given the offenses that they are in. Now, if we're going to continue to look at rushing touchdowns, Breece Hall versus Pacheco is very interesting for a couple different reasons. Now, first thing I want to say is Isaiah Pacheco looks to be a great value in these drafts right now. Isaiah Pacheco is the running back 24, running back 25. So he's going as a low-end RB2, high-end running back 3 in fantasy drafts. And this is a running back that does have touchdown upside, right? I mean, if you were to go out there and be the starting running back this next season for Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, I think we can assume that, yes, Isaiah Pacheco can score a lot of touchdowns. But there's a reason Isaiah Pacheco right now is going as the running back 24, the running back 25. It's the fact that there are still sharks out there in the water where Kansas City is an interesting landing spot. You still have the possibility that Dalvin Cook finds his way to KC. You still have the possibility that Kareem Hunt finds his way to KC. Leonard Fournette is in Kansas City. Ezekiel Elliott in Kansas City. That's a very real concern for Isaiah Pacheco. And Isaiah Pacheco, for that reason, is going running back 24, running back 25. And with Breece Hall, yes, Breece Hall, you're having to worry about him coming off a torn ACL. I get it. But this was the number 1 running back in last year's draft class compared to someone who went in the 7th round. These are both year 2 RBs, right? Breece Hall right now is going as the running back 11 in fantasy football drafts, as a low-end RB1 in comparison to Isaiah Pacheco as a low-end RB2, high-end RB3. I am not as worried about a running back going to the Jets. Now, I know I've had a lot of people in my live streams as of late saying, Mason, do you think Dalvin Cook's going to the Jets? I heard Dalvin Cook's going to the... Why the hell would that ever happen? Why the hell would y'all ever think that? No, I think that Breece Hall is a safe bet over Isaiah Pacheco in fantasy football drafts. And I think Breece Hall is a safe bet over Isaiah Pacheco with rushing touchdowns this next season as well. So I'm going to go ahead and take the Breece Hall line there. But of course, if y'all want to check out any of these player props, if y'all want to get in a draft with us, we're doing them every single day on the live stream. You can find them both in the same spot. I mean, both on Underdog Fantasy. And if you want to get into that draft with us, if you want to check out a player prop, you can go sign up to Underdog with promo code FLOCK. They'll match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to 100. So it's pretty much free for you to check out. You can get my 2023 fantasy football rankings for free. A free trial to flockfantasy.com. If you use promo code FLOCK on Underdog Fantasy with the link in the live chat, the link in the description, and the link in the comment section. But I think that's all I have for you. Again, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Really do appreciate you. Really hope you have a great day and really hope we get to see you in the live stream tonight.